You asked for it and now you got it. Today we're gonna cook blueberry-ish donuts on a wood stove. And the exciting thing about this is it's something you can actually do if you're out on an extended camping trip and you don't even need to bring yeast. All you need to bring really is flour and probably grease. But some of that you're gonna have anyway. What we're going to start with is the yeast, making your own. And we're going to mix it right in to a bread dough. So I'm going to start by cleaning out this morning's scrapings from my sourdough. Put that right in here with my other sourdough starter. Put that aside. And we'll do a video on that later. I'd say that's about ready to bake. I don't measure my ingredients once I learn a recipe. So, for the demonstration, I'm going to be demonstrating without a recipe, measurements, and weighing. But, for some of those of you who aren't familiar with making bread, I'll go ahead and talk out the ingredients, the recipe, and I'll go ahead and put it in the description. So typically, a bread recipe consists of yeast, water, salt, an egg, and flour. So the way I've been doing this is that I put dried blueberries in a jar. You probably can use about that much. Fill it to about there with water. Because if you overfill it, the blueberries will swell up and spill over like they did for me, because you don't put this on watertight. You do that and then you let it sit for a few days. Just add your blueberries, water, I keep it here near my wood stove so it stays fairly warm. Just put the cap right on top. If it starts to smell like nail polish remover, then you need more air. But I've been doing pretty good just by putting it on. Then you tighten it up once a day, at least, and shake it really good. I find shaking it easier than stirring it, but same concept. Then, a normal recipe will call for 1 1/3 cups of water. So I just replaced that water with my berry yeast juice. There's a cup, and got some berries in there. Let's get those out. Actually, doesn't hurt to leave them. And now this is my 3rd or 4th time using this particular yeast. And what I do is, you can see there's still water in there, so I just fill it up and let it keep going. So I'll do that later. You can also pour it off into another jar, add sugar, shake each day, and make wine. I think it's working. That's an experiment. So in the recipe for bread, it takes 1 1/3 cups water and 2 teaspoons of yeast. This right here fulfills that part of the ingredients. So then we skip to the salt. I think it would normally be about a teaspoon for normal bread, but it's my understanding when working with these cultivated yeasts and with sourdough that you want to add a lot less salt. Salt inhibits the production of the yeast. So in other words, it won't rise as well if you use more salt. So go sparingly. After that, we're going to use an egg. I've got one of these pretty blue eggs from my hard-working hen. And you simply put that in there. Save that for the hens. They absolutely love them. And where is my fork? Found it. So now you simply stir up these ingredients really good. And then for adding flour, the recipe calls for 3 cups of normal white flour. But what you're really looking for is the proper elasticity and moisture content of your dough. Therefore, I just add until it's the right consistency that I'm looking for. Now if you're using whole wheat flour, it soaks up more slowly and it soaks up more. So you would probably want to use, maybe 2.5 cups of whole wheat flour if you were just using flour. Or if you were mixing. That's why it's great to get an idea for the feel and mix in the flour kind of slowly rather than just throwing it in according to the recipe. Now if you are used to working with normal bread, it rises in about 2 hours. That's generally what a recipe gives you. But sourdough and cultivated yeast rises a lot slower. That's why right now it's morning, and I'm going to come back and finish this video hopefully early evening while it's still light out and when it's risen to its full capacity. So you just add some flour, mix it in. It's okay to take your time on this. It gives the yeast time to kind of infiltrate and make bubbles. But there's bubbles, so it looks like we're doing well. Now, personally, I normally eat whole wheat, and I would even mix my donuts with whole wheat if I'm doing them on a regular basis. But this is special dessert donuts that we're doing, so I'm going to just add white flour. Oh, and that reminds me, I was going to add a little bit of sugar. Still like pancake batter, so we got more to go. So the reason for donuts is sometimes it's a whole lot easier to deep fry, or even fry. It doesn't have to be deep fried. It's a whole lot easier to fry than it is to bake. Baking out in the woods or even in a cabin can be more challenging. It's possible. I've made 2 ovens myself. One with brick and one when I was actually out on a camping trip and made it with rock. And so it can be done. But maybe you just don't want to go to all that work and you'd rather just use a little oil in a pan and fry your bread. So that's a reason to make donuts rather than a loaf of bread. And that's why a person would make whole wheat donuts, because it's more for a bread aspect than it is for a dessert. But in this case, we're making a dessert. And I guess I won't add the fructose. I'll just sprinkle a little on top when I'm done. But that's an alternative you can do. You can add, in a recipe like this, you could add 2, 3, or 4 teaspoons of sugar, depending on how much you want. And it just adds a little hint of sweetness to it. Makes it more like a donut rather than just bread. Now we're starting to get to where it's time to stop adding flour. Now in the cooking shows, at this point, they would tell you something like, lightly flour your fingers, put a little on the board, that's enough. And then they stop the camera 15 times and clean up so that it looks like they're doing this great clean job of making bread. But that's a bunch of BS in my opinion. You're gonna get flour caked on here, but don't worry, just soak it in warm water and wait, and then it'll go away. But trying to avoid it and look like a cooking show, that's just silly. This is real cooking here. You're going to get all the bad with the good. So it's a little too moist, so I'm going to go ahead and add a little more flour and keep some on hand. And now I'm kneading it in the bowl. They never do that in the cooking shows, but to me, if I'm out camping, it's way easier to just mix it in whatever I'm mixing it in, to knead it in whatever I'm mixing it in, than it is to try to flour a flat surface. And it's just not very practical. And even at home, this makes a whole lot less mess than if I were to throw it out there on the table. So kneading it is important versus making biscuits. Biscuits you want to just knead as lightly as possible, but with yeast bread you do want to do a good 5 minutes. Now if I had had time, it would have made sense to warm up the water a little bit. So that was, even though it was near my wood stove, it's pretty warm these days, so I'm not keeping the wood stove as hot as normal. And so the yeast water wasn't very warm. And so that'll also take longer to make it activate. So if you've got time or the forethought, wouldn't hurt to increase the temperature, but don't boil it because that'll kill everything. Don't even increase it over 105, 110 degrees. Just get it up where it's warm. Almost too warm to put your fingers in is the peak that you want to get it to. And if you add it like that, then that yeast will activate a lot faster. But as I was adding the flour, I did see bubbles, and so I think this is a pretty healthy and active yeast. So I think we're going to have pretty good results. It's about 9 a.m. and it gets dark these days around 5:30. So I am hoping that by 4:30 or so, 7 hours, hopefully in 7 hours, this bad boy will be risen nicely so that I can finish the video and show you how to turn it into donuts. Just because you simplify your food and you live outside of society doesn't mean that food has to taste bad or be boring. So I'm going to give that a go like that. I'm just going to cover it with my towel and let it sit fairly close to that wood stove. And hopefully in 7 hours it'll be risen and we can get back to making this video. I'll see you soon.